Let's go, Mr. Driver. Oh, hang on, sorry, wrong game. Lotus Esprit Turbo Challenge is a 1990 game published by Gremlin and developed by Magnetic Fields, i.e. Sean Southern and Andrew Morris, and it spawned an entire series, well, 2 more games after this. And we're going to start off on the Atari ST. Yes, it's a racing game, and it's endorsed by or linked to Lotus. Came out in 1990 on the ST, Amiga, Amstrad Spectrum and C64. Also CD32 version on the Lotus Trilogy CD. We're starting off on the ST, and you get all this introduction which we're going to run through, giving you lots and lots of specs they've got off of Lotus. And well, probably the first time you saw a 3D rotating model on your ST. I'm going for automatic gears, and alternative control means you press fire to accelerate. Here on the ST you can choose which music track you want during the game, or you can do what I'm going to do here and just select the engine noises. Almost like a homage to Outrun, isn't it? Which is this game is definitely influenced by Outrun. You get a little bit of information about the course, starting getting 4 laps, 1 mile each. Flat course with gentle curves and no hazards. Nigel Mainsail, a mainstay of Sean Southern's racing games, features. And you'll notice, first of all, yes, it's a 2-player game, but if you're playing 1 player, you have to play the game as if you're going around your friend's house and peering through their letterbox, playing a normal game. Takes some getting used to. Over to the Amiga. This is running on my Amiga 1200, which is accelerated, which upsets people tough. So the standard Amiga 500 version is going to run about the same speed as we've seen on the ST, but this is going to be much, much smoother, which again upsets people. But due to current circumstances, I can't get it my A600. That graphic there of the Lotus, you'll see again in Lotus 2. Interestingly, the Wikipedia page says the Amiga version is the most advanced, and then bracket citation needed. Presumably it was an ST owner who put that there, because we can see, yeah, this is miles ahead, isn't it? On the Amiga here, I've opted for sound effects. Now, you've got to get the hang of this game, because there is a certain technique to driving. First of all, you need to let off the throttle going around the corners, because your Lotus will handle better if you're going slower around the corners. It's not a case of just going flat out at all time. Secondly, and you will notice this, on the 16-bit versions, the cars tend to try to move in front of you to stop you overtaking, which is quite irritating, because you'll be flying past, they'll be going slowly, even if it's back markers, and they will just swerve in front of you. So the easiest place to overtake is actually on corners, because they will stick in their lane around corners, and finish second here on the Amiga. C64 version. Mixed opinions of this from Commodore owners. Some owners like this, some owners don't. I don't like that font, or the O on that font. You can choose 1 of 3 tracks. And off we go. And get my controls. Everyone will pull away from you at the start. We're on to the last lap now, and we've made some progress at last. It's a big jump coming over from the 16-bit versions. Now, you'll be looking at this thinking it's not actually very playable, but actually, it is. It's actually quite good. And that's race over there. Over to the Amstrad. Amstrad Action loved this game. Of course, this is part of the Gremlin trilogy of this era, with Toyota Celica, Supercars, and this. Supercars and Lotus coming from the same stable magnetic fields. Amstrad version is in mode 1. Looks a little bit garish, but you do get the colour variations between levels, and all the colours are, all the cars are solid, although they are the same colour. It looks jerky, but actually the handling is very precise. Very precise. You'll see this on the Spectrum version as well. Takes some, all these versions take some getting used to, especially if you've played Lotus 2 before and are coming to this. The letterbox view is more restrictive on the 8-bit versions because of the frame rate and draw distances. I bought my copy of this game on the Spectrum on the GBH re-release label. Three different levels of difficulty for gameplay: easy, medium and hard. On the easy level you have 7 of the easier courses to race around, and it increases as you go through. So on the Spectrum it is less colourful than the Amstrad. The problem, and the frame rate here is better, but marginally, but it has the same precision as the Amstrad version. The cars don't swerve in front of you like the 16-bit versions do, which is quite nice coming over from those versions. The graphics are very well defined. The problem is, in small window, the lower resolution here, it is harder to see what's coming up, and with the reduced frame rate, when we're going really fast, the objects outside the road do whiz past you. As in 3 frames and they're gone, which is bad news when it comes to things like cornering markers or obstacles. Back on the ST. And we finished the first race in 10th. That qualifies you. And you will start the next race in the opposite position to where you started. So if you finished last, you qualify, start the next race first. If you finish first, you start the next race last. T. Harry Bootson, I don't know who that's a parody name of. Mexico is level 2. Alan Phosphate has the course record. We're going to do 5 laps. Shallow Hills, some roadworks and lane closed. Because you always want roadworks on a racetrack, don't you? So you can see immediately coming out from the 8-bit versions, the draw distance is better on the 16-bits. You just see that bit more around you, even though you're still playing through a letterbox. It's such a shame this game isn't full screen in one player. Well, they fixed this for Lotus 2. In Lotus 2, of course, it's full screen, except if you're in 2-player mode, then when you do play in a window, which is fair enough. This game also uses a course approach, whereas Lotus 2 becomes more of an Outrun open road approach, so you don't do laps. It's got roadworks, which is what everyone wants on a racetrack, which means you're restricted in lanes and can't get past. The pits are there. You will need those in later races to stop for fuel. On the left hand side you have a little indicator showing you how far around the lap and indeed the race you are. You have a fuel indicator and an RPM indicator. You need to keep an eye on that fuel indicator and that race length indicator and manage them against each other. But we'll come to that because we don't need to stop for a fuel break at the moment. No tyres, nothing like pit stop 2. It is just fuel. Which was quite an innovation at the time, that the fact that you have to do some resource management when you're playing the game. I can't think of too many games that have fuel involved that aren't Formula 1 games, that are just out and out racing games like this. Over to the Amiga. Yes, it's accelerated. Yes, it's faster. And yes, the Lotus does sound like a Hoover. It's my criticism of all the Lotus games. I'm sure it is a sample of a real Lotus, but it sounds a bit... yeah. Lovely draw distance. Oh, we nearly finished the race now. Get past him. You can go off on the side. Just don't hit an object. You can't smash up the car because Lotus don't like that. Third place on the spectrum. Oh, come off. Lap 6 of 7. You can see now with the frame rate, and I'm going really fast. It's, yeah. You don't get much chance to see what's going on really outside the road. It just, you get 1, 2, 3 frames going past. It's bad news for stopping for things like the pits or just seeing stuff, or obstacles as well, actually. There aren't as many obstacles in the Spectrum and CPC version as there are in the C64 or ST and Amiga versions, but there's still stuff hanging around you need to keep an eye out for. And there's no indication of how far you are around the lap on the Spectrum version there. Over to the Amstrad. You can see the colour scheme's changed. This looks nice, really nice. Obviously they could have made the car possibly white, but then, yeah. I think they've chosen the same colour as the sky to be the most sensible colour, because when you start to think about it, when you've got 4 colours to play with, and you want to keep the car a consistent colour between all the levels, what do? C64. Lotus is sounding very throaty, like it might need new exhaust. And again, there's some weird... We're in 7th. There's some obstacles on the road. You have to avoid it when you want to hit them. Or you don't want to go off the road either. Again, I imagine this looks quite clunky on the video, and yet, actually to play, it's not bad. The laps are very short. I'll give it that. And the fuel usage is incredibly high. It's very noticeable coming over. I'm out of fuel, but I have qualified anyway. I rolled across the line with no fuel in my engine. Yeah, I got 5th, that's cool. 3rd in the league. The aim is, of course, to win the Drivers' League. So we're off to Norwich. Flat with a few sharp bends, grit on road, lane closures. Fantastic. What a way to maintain a race course. Lane closures and detritus on the road. On some of the versions you can use the pit lane to overtake, but you will slow down. And that's the thing as well. On the 16-bit versions, if you pull into the pit lane, your car will slow down. But on the 8-bit versions, you'll just fly past, and it can be quite hard to actually pit, because you're just literally so, right, there's the pit indicator, I will slow down, and you'll whiz straight past. On the ST and Amiga version, it's much easier. Oh, see, why are there signs in the middle of the road? Lane closure where? Ugh. Because the draw distances on these 8-bit versions, it's quite hard to see some of the obstacles that you need to see to avoid. You can pull over there and get some fuel. And there we go, just top up there, because I suspect we're going to need it to finish this race. In any case, I'm 19th. I don't know if the other cars pause when you're in the pits or if they continue to race. I don't know, because you never see them pit, so there must be some. Yeah. Anyway, across to the Amiga version, we're in 8th, and this is what it's all about. Look at this. Look at the colours, look at the speed, look at it go! Oh! Look at that road drawing routine. Oh, need to get some fuel, need to get some fuel, need to get some fuel. No, fuel up, fuel up, fuel up, fuel up. What's that man doing to himself behind? Anyway. Look at this. This is what being an Amiga owner is all about, isn't it? Bright colours, cracking tune. Look at that sky! And that draw distance. This is the kind of game that makes you want to own an Amiga. This is what it's all about. Gorgeous. Absolutely stunning. And it gets better with Lotus too. Oh, yeah, it all comes to a horrible disaster as I crash into the back of an ST owner. This is really what it's all about. I'm back on the Amstrad where it's a little bit different. But it's still fun. And I have to say, these 8-bit versions, they're all good. I do like these Z80 versions for just the precision, and as I hit something there, just it's very precise. You put the car somewhere, it goes there. Less realistic, the handling, sure, but... So the thing about Lotus is it has 2-player mode, and of course that's going to slow the computers down, isn't it, with the frame rate. So I guess we should look at all the versions and see how they play. On the Specky, yes, it's slowed down, but it's still quite playable. It still looks good. This game scored highly in the Your Sinclair reader poll, as I recall, although so did Horace Goes Skiing, which I know nothing about. No, nothing about that. Amstrad version, I'm afraid, does become just a little bit too slow. It's just a little... just not quite enough. ST version, perfectly serviceable. Apart from the fact I'm trying to play 2 games at once, or 2 cars at once, and not doing very well, especially because one of the controllers is a mouse. C64 version, it's slower, but it just about gets away with it. And on the Amiga, well, accelerated Amiga, so it just kind of goes, yeah, I can do this, but I don't have a second joystick on here. Second joystick port is a mouse, so I'm not, yeah. Perhaps I'll have to get a friend one day. The other unique things about Lotus games is tracks like this. We've got an ice track where it's actually at Prudhoe Bay, the home of ice road truckers. The ice is dangerously thin. Cutaway shot of a wheel going over some ice from underneath. It could crack, although it won't, because it never does. And you get the desert levels as well, and the handling changes. Car doesn't go as fast. So atmospheric. Although what I want is those long draw distances. Of course, where would we be with the magnetic fields game without a built-in hidden game? And there's this, well, you just shoot the rocks basically game built in on the Amiga. Lotus Esprit Turbo Challenge, what a remarkable game. Let's start off with that Amiga version. Well, if Lotus 2 didn't exist, then this would be one of the best, if not the best, out-and-out racing game on the Amiga. It wants to be Outrun, and certainly it beats Outrun on the 16 bits by quite some margin, managing to emulate that feel the Outrun arcade machine had when you've got those vistas sweeping in front of you, the massive draw distances, the sheer sense of speed and cracking soundtrack. And that's before we get to the 2-player mode, all the different scenery, the different driving environments. But the problem is, of course, Lotus 2 exists, and it takes all this and does it all even better. The ST can never match the polish of the Amiga, there goes the downvotes, but it still plays remarkably well and is really good fun, and again, is one of the best racing games on the system. But again, Lotus 2 exists. For the 8-bits, however, Lotus 2 doesn't exist. There's no versions for those systems. The C64 is notoriously bad at driving games, yet actually, although you'd think this game would be a clunker, it plays quite well, providing you temper your expectations. What I can say about the Spectrum and the Amstrad versions is the handling is really, really precise. They've worked so hard to get that aspect of the game really nailed down. And when you've got a lower frame rate and a more compromised system, that is so important, because you're never going to get that impression of speed on the Spectrum or Amstrad or any 8-bit, but what you can get is a good, solid racing game where you can pick your position between two cars you're going to overtake, position your car and go straight through. And that's really hard actually on the ST and Amiga versions, where it's easier to overtake on a corner. On the Amstrad and Spectrum versions, you can just place your car, you get it right, you will sail straight through. Compromise these versions maybe, but they're still fully featured with the 2-player mode, even if I think that 2-player mode is just a little bit too slow on the Amstrad. Overall, for their respective systems, these are all cracking conversions, but that Amiga version, if you're coming from Lotus 2, you may be a little bit disappointed in this game. But if you've only ever played Lotus 1 and you move to Lotus 2, you'll realise they built on something extremely solid here and made the changes that were needed. Without this game, we wouldn't have Lotus 2, and that game is something really special.